Hashtag the elite assassins never saw him. Earth's ninja was already there. The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time in 2 standard cycles. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire slammed his scaled fist against the crystalline table, causing ripples of concern among the assembled delegates from 47 different worlds. Another one of our top operatives is dead, he hissed through rows of needle-sharp teeth. Found hanging upside down from the ceiling of his secure chamber on Nexus Station. No wounds, no signs of struggle, no security footage of any intruder. Just dead. The Thrakkery delegate, a towering insectoid creature with compound eyes that glittered like black diamonds, clicked her mandibles nervously. Our Shadow Guild has lost 3 assassins this month. Each one was found in impossible positions. One was discovered sealed inside a ventilation shaft that required complete disassembly to access. Another was found sitting peacefully in his meditation pod, except his heart had simply stopped. Murmurs of unease rippled through the council chamber. For over 1,000 years, the various galactic civilizations had maintained their Cold Wars and territorial disputes through the use of elite assassination guilds. The Vorthan Death Dancers could phase through solid matter. The Thrakkery Shadow Guild could bend light around themselves, becoming truly invisible. The Colonian Void Walkers could step between dimensions. Each species had perfected their own unique methods of silent killing, honed over millennia of evolution and technological advancement. Yet something was hunting the hunters. The pattern is clear, announced High Arbiter Vexnos, the Council's ancient ethereal chairman whose consciousness existed as pure energy within a containment field. Someone or something is systematically eliminating our most skilled operatives across all species and guild affiliations. The question is who possesses such capabilities. The Colonian representative, a being of living shadow that constantly shifted and writhed within its environmental suit, spoke in a voice like whispers from the void. Our intelligence suggests these deaths are not random. Each target was eliminated while attempting to carry out high-priority missions. Someone is interfering with our operations. Interfering? Zethkar's eyes blazed. This is systematic extermination. 3 cycles ago, my best operative, SYXTEL the Phantom Blade, was sent to eliminate a human diplomat on the trade station Meridian Prime. She was found 3 days later in her own ship's cargo hold, wrapped in some kind of thin cord that our scientists couldn't identify. The security log showed her entering the station alone and never coming out. The council chamber fell silent. The humans were still relatively new to galactic politics, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 2 centuries ago. They were considered a minor species, useful for their surprising adaptability and their willingness to serve as neutral mediators in disputes between the major powers. The idea that they might be involved in something like this seemed absurd. Surely you're not suggesting that the humans are responsible, the Thrakkery delegate chittered. They barely have any military presence beyond their home system. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. They don't even have proper stealth capabilities. But Zethkar was pulling up holographic displays of incident reports. Look at the locations. Meridian Prime, where humans have a major trading post. Nexus Station, where they maintain their largest diplomatic facility outside Earth system. Kepler Outpost, where their exploration fleet has a refueling depot. Every single assassination attempt that resulted in the death of our operatives occurred in locations with significant human presence. The pattern was undeniable once laid out in the star charts. A constellation of human facilities matched perfectly with the locations where the galaxy's most elite killers had met their mysterious ends. High Arbiter Vexnos pulsed with agitated energy. This is a serious accusation, Ambassador Zethkar. The humans signed the Meridian Accords. They agreed to remain neutral in our affairs. To suggest they have developed capabilities that exceed our own. I'm not suggesting anything, Zethkar interrupted. I am stating facts. Something is protecting human interests, and it's something none of our intelligence networks have been able to identify or track. Our operatives don't just fail their missions against human targets, they die in ways that should be impossible. The Colonian shadow being rippled with what might have been concern. What do we know about human defensive capabilities? Their published military specifications show conventional kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, standard armor systems. Nothing that should trouble our elite operatives. That's exactly the problem, said the Thackeray delegate. According to all available intelligence, humans shouldn't be able to detect our operatives, let alone eliminate them. Yet something is doing exactly that. Ambassador Zethkar activated another holographic display, this one showing surveillance footage from various locations. Watch this. Nexus Station security feed from Corridor 7 Alpha. The night Kethmos the Voidstepper was killed. The holovid showed an empty hallway, completely normal for several minutes. Then, inexplicably, a Colonian operative materialized from dimensional space, already dead, crumpling to the floor. He was one of our best, the Colonian whispered, capable of stepping between dimensions at will. Nothing should have been able to touch him while he was phase-shifted. Another video played, showing the interior of a luxury suite on Meridian Prime. SYXTEL the Phantom Blade, moments before her death. The feed showed a seemingly empty room, but the thermal sensors detected the faint heat signature of the invisible Vorthan assassin moving toward what appeared to be an unconscious human diplomat sleeping in bed. The signature moved closer, then suddenly stopped. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, the heat signature began moving in an erratic pattern, as if struggling with something, before disappearing entirely from the sensors. The diplomatic suite's security system shows no other heat signatures, no energy discharges, no signs of any other presence, Zethkar explained. Yet somehow, our invisible assassin was overpowered and killed by something that doesn't show up on any of our sensors. The implications were staggering. For centuries, the various species had built their military doctrines around the assumption that they understood the capabilities of their rivals. The Vorthan had their phase technology, the Thackeray had their light bending, the Colonians had dimensional manipulation. Each species had their trump cards, their secret weapons that gave them an edge. But the humans? The humans were supposed to be simple, straightforward, primitive even. They used bullets and explosives while other species had moved on to energy weapons and exotic physics. They relied on crude detection methods while others had developed sensors that could track quantum fluctuations and dimensional disturbances. Yet something associated with humanity was systematically dismantling the most sophisticated killers in the galaxy. I propose we conduct a joint investigation, announced High Arbiter Vexnos after a long pause. Pool our intelligence resources and determine exactly what we're dealing with. If the humans have developed some new defensive capability, we need to understand it. And if they haven't, ask the Thackeray delegate. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. If the humans hadn't developed this capability themselves, then what was protecting them? What kind of guardian could move unseen among species that had perfected invisibility, could strike at beings who existed partially outside normal space, could kill the unkillable? Ambassador Zethkar's expression was grim as he considered the possibilities. Then, we may be dealing with something far more dangerous than a new human technology. We may be dealing with something that sees our elite operatives not as apex predators, but as prey. The council chamber erupted in overlapping conversations as delegates began discussing the implications in their native languages. Through it all, High Arbiter Vexnos remained silent, his energy field pulsing with deep concern. In his 1,000 years of existence, he had seen species rise and fall, had witnessed the birth and death of entire civilizations. But he had never seen anything quite like this. Something was out there in the dark between the stars, something that moved like a ghost and struck like lightning. Something that had turned the hunters into the hunted. And somehow, impossibly, it seemed to be connected to the most unlikely species in the galaxy, the humans. As the emergency session continued deep into the station's artificial night, none of the assembled delegates noticed the faint shadow that had been listening from the ventilation system above their heads. None of their advanced sensors detected the presence that had been recording every word, every gesture, every tactical discussion. None of them realized that even now, in their most secure facility, surrounded by the best security technology in the galaxy, they were being watched. The shadow shifted slightly, a movement so subtle that it wouldn't have registered on instruments designed to detect creatures that could bend space and time. Then, as quietly as mist dissipating in sunlight, it was gone. But somewhere in the darkness between the stars, a message was already racing toward a small blue planet on the outer edge of the galaxy. A world where an ancient tradition of silent movement and precise killing had been refined not through technology or genetic enhancement, but through discipline, patience, and an understanding of the human spirit that no alien species had yet grasped. Earth was about to receive a status report. And on Earth, someone was going to be very interested to learn that their students' lessons had been so thoroughly understood. The galaxy's elite killers thought they were the apex of their craft. They were about to discover that on a small, overlooked world, the art of the shadow had been perfected long before any of them had left their home planets. They were about to meet the ninja. Hashtag the elite assassins never saw him. Earth's ninja was already there, continued. The morning mist hung low over the ancient mountains of IGA province as Kenji Nakamura completed his meditation in the traditional manner his ancestors had practiced for over 800 years. At 43, he looked younger than most humans half his age, his body maintained through decades of rigorous training that combined physical discipline with mental clarity. To anyone observing from the small village below, he appeared to be nothing more than a historian who had inherited his grandfather's remote mountain property. They would have been wrong. Kenji was the last true ninja, trained in techniques that had been passed down through an unbroken lineage since the feudal period. While the rest of the world had moved on to guns and satellites and quantum computers, his family had preserved something far more valuable. The understanding that the greatest weapon was not technology, but the human will refine to its ultimate expression. His grandfather had been a real ninja, one of the last to serve during World War II. His father had adapted those skills for modern espionage, working quietly for various governments during the Cold War. And Kenji? Kenji had taken those ancient arts and applied them to an arena no human had ever imagined when the techniques were first developed. Space. The secure communication device hidden within his tea ceremony set chirped softly with an encrypted message from stars. Kenji finished his meditation before rising to check it, his movements flowing like water across stone. Patience was the foundation of everything. Rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes led to death. The message was from Akira Tanaka, his student and the first human to successfully apply traditional ninja techniques in zero-gravity environments. Akira had volunteered for the Human Diplomatic Corps specifically to serve as Kenji's eyes and ears among the stars, officially listed as a cultural attaché, but functioning as something far more important. Earth's hidden guardian. Master, the message began, using the old forms of respect that Akira maintained even in digital communication. The Galactic Council grows suspicious. They have connected the deaths of their operatives to human presence. A joint investigation is being organized. They do not yet suspect the truth, but their intelligence networks are formidable. Request guidance. Kenji allowed himself a slight smile as he prepared his morning tea with the same ritualistic precision his family had used for generations. The galaxy's elite killers were finally beginning to understand that they were no longer the apex predators they believed themselves to be. It had taken them 3 years to even notice the pattern. For beings who prided themselves on intelligence and observation, they had been remarkably slow to adapt. But then, they had never encountered anything like traditional human stealth techniques before. Their technology was impressive, certainly. The ability to phase through matter, to bend light, to step between dimensions, these were capabilities that would have seemed like magic to the ancient ninja masters. But they all shared a fundamental flaw. They relied entirely on technology and genetic adaptation. They had never learned the most important lesson of true stealth. Invisibility was not about what others couldn't see. It was about becoming something they wouldn't think to look for. Kenji's student had understood this perfectly. While alien assassins relied on exotic physics to hide their presence, Akira simply moved like a maintenance worker, a cleaning crew member, a food service employee. He dressed like them, acted like them, became functionally invisible not through technology, but through the simple art of being unremarkable. The alien operatives could phase through walls, but they still thought like predators. They still moved with the confidence of apex hunters. They still believed that their superiority came from their special abilities rather than their understanding of the environment they operated in. That arrogance had been their downfall. Kenji activated his own communication array, a device that appeared to be nothing more than an antique radio to any casual observer. In reality, It was connected to a network of quantum entanglement transmitters that allowed instantaneous communication across interstellar distances, a gift from humanity's few alien allies who appreciated Earth's diplomatic neutrality. Continue observation, he transmitted back to Akira. Do not engage unless human lives are directly threatened. Let them investigate. They will find nothing because they are looking for the wrong things. The shadow does not fear the light that seeks it. But even as he sent the message, Kenji knew that the situation was escalating beyond simple protection missions. The galactic powers were beginning to take notice of humanity's seemingly miraculous survival rate when targeted by assassins. Soon, they would move beyond investigation to direct action. It was time to expand the program. Over the following weeks, encrypted messages began flowing from Earth to human facilities throughout the galaxy. To outside observers, they appeared to be routine personnel transfers and administrative updates. In reality, they were mobilization orders for a network that had been carefully built over the past decade. The Diplomatic Security Division had always seemed like a minor department within Earth's interstellar government. Their agents were unremarkable people with unremarkable backgrounds, assigned to provide basic protection for human facilities and personnel in space. Most aliens barely noticed them, dismissing them as typical human paranoia translated into bureaucracy. None of them realized that every single agent in the DSD had spent at least 2 years training in the mountains of Japan with the last traditional ninja master on Earth. Marcus Chun had been a school teacher before volunteering for the DSD. Now he worked as a safety inspector on Kepler Outpost, conducting routine checks of life support systems and emergency protocols. His cover was perfect because it was completely genuine. He really did inspect safety systems with meticulous care. But his definition of safety included threats that didn't appear on any official checklist. Sarah Williams managed inventory systems for the human trading post on Meridian Prime. She knew the location of every supply crate, every spare part, every maintenance tool in the facility. More importantly, she knew how to move through the service corridors and maintenance shafts without appearing on security sensors that were calibrated to detect alien infiltration methods, not someone who belonged there in the first place. David Park worked in communications on Nexus Station, maintaining the quantum entanglement arrays that allowed faster-than-light communication between human facilities. His official security clearance gave him access to virtually every section of the station, and his habit of working odd hours to accommodate time differences between various human colonies meant that nobody questioned his presence anywhere at any time. To the galactic intelligence agencies beginning their investigation, these people were invisible not because they were hidden, but because they were exactly what they appeared to be, ordinary humans doing ordinary jobs with extraordinary competence. But Kenji had taught them something that no alien species understood about humans. Every culture in human history had produced individuals capable of incredible feats when properly motivated and trained. The ninjas of feudal Japan had been farmers and merchants and craftsmen who became legends through discipline and dedication. The modern inheritors of that tradition were teachers and technicians and administrators who had learned to see their ordinary roles as the perfect foundation for extraordinary capabilities. The investigation began in earnest when a joint task force of elite operatives from all major galactic powers converged on Meridian Prime. They brought with them the most advanced detection equipment their civilizations could produce, sensors capable of tracking dimensional disturbances, quantum fluctuation detectors, psionic resonance mappers, and temporal displacement monitors. They found absolutely nothing unusual. Sarah Williams continued her inventory duties, cataloging shipments, and checking supply levels with the same methodical precision she had shown for 3 years. The alien investigators recorded her daily routines, analyzed her movement patterns, and subjected her to every scanning protocol they could devise without alerting her to their presence. She appeared to be exactly what her records indicated, a competent administrator with a background in logistics management and a spotless employment record. What they didn't know was that she had also cataloged every blind spot in their surveillance network within the first day of their arrival. Her training allowed her to track their movements through subtle changes in air circulation patterns, variations in ambient electromagnetic fields, and the barely perceptible vibrations that even the most advanced stealth technology couldn't completely eliminate. While they watched her, she was watching them back. The first test came when the Thackeray operative Zexmoth, the light bender, attempted to infiltrate the human diplomatic quarters during a shift change. His light manipulation technology rendered him completely invisible to normal vision and most sensor arrays, allowing him to slip past 3 layers of security that should have detected any intrusion. He never made it to his target. Security footage from the corridor showed him materializing suddenly, already unconscious, somehow entangled in what appeared to be extremely thin wire. Medical analysis revealed that he had been rendered unconscious through pressure applied to specific nerve clusters that Thackeray anatomy texts indicated should have been impossible to access without causing significant trauma. The investigating team was baffled. Their colleague had been neutralized by someone who apparently knew Thackeray physiology better than most Thackeray medics, using techniques that left no trace evidence and required no exotic technology. But Sarah Williams had learned that lesson during her first month of training with Kenji. Every species had pressure points, nerve clusters, and anatomical vulnerabilities. The key was not to rely on human anatomical knowledge, but to understand the underlying principles that applied to any nervous system. Pressure, leverage, timing. These concepts were universal, even if their specific application varied between species. The investigation team's confusion deepened when their Vorthan operative Kethanael, the Phase Walker, attempted a similar infiltration 2 days later. His ability to shift partially out of phase with normal matter should have made him undetectable and untouchable. Instead, he was found unconscious in a storage closet, somehow restrained by what appeared to be ordinary cleaning supplies arranged in a configuration that prevented him from returning to full phase. The alien investigators began to suspect that they were dealing with someone who had detailed knowledge of their capabilities, but their analysis kept coming back to the same impossible conclusion. The only people with access to the areas where their operatives were being neutralized were ordinary human staff members going about their routine duties. What they failed to understand was that Sarah and her colleagues weren't using exotic countermeasures or advanced technology. They were using something far more fundamental: pattern recognition, environmental awareness, and the kind of three-dimensional thinking that came from years of training in spaces where a single mistake meant death. Kenji had taught them that every ability, no matter how advanced, created predictable patterns in its user. Invisible beings still displaced air, phased entities still interacted with electromagnetic fields, and dimensional walkers still had to orient themselves relative to normal space when they emerged from their special state. More importantly, he had taught them that confidence was a weakness. The alien operatives approached their missions with the absolute certainty that their abilities made them superior to any opposition they might encounter. That confidence led to predictable behavior, and predictable behavior could be exploited by someone who understood the environment better than the intruder did. As the investigation continued, and more attempts ended in failure and capture, the alien task force began to develop theories about what they were facing. Some suggested advanced human technology that had been kept secret from galactic authorities. Others proposed the existence of a previously unknown human subspecies with natural stealth abilities. None of them considered the possibility that they were being systematically outmaneuvered by people using techniques that were older than faster-than-light travel, older than energy weapons, older than most of their civilizations. None of them realized that they were trying to hunt ghosts who had been perfecting the art of being unseen for over 1,000 years. And none of them understood that their investigation was about to take a turn that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Because Kenji Nakamura had decided that it was time for the galaxy to learn what humanity was truly capable of when pushed too far. Hashtag the elite assassins never saw him. Earth's ninja was already there, continued. The emergency meeting was held in the most secure facility the Galactic Council could arrange. A mobile command ship that materialized from hyperspace at random coordinates every few hours, protected by the combined military might of 5 different species. Inside its shielded conference room, the investigation task force presented their findings to increasingly frustrated intelligence chiefs. 17 operatives, reported Commander Thexlar of the Vorthan Military Intelligence Division, his scaled features twisted with barely controlled rage. 17 of our best agents, each one neutralized while attempting to eliminate human targets or investigate human facilities. Not killed, you understand. Neutralized. Captured. humiliated. The holographic displays around the conference table showed surveillance footage from a dozen different incidents. Alien operatives being found unconscious in impossible locations, restrained by everyday objects used in ways that defied their understanding of physics and tactics. The pattern is consistent across all our operations, added Hivesinger Zitharia of the Thackeray Intelligence Collective, her compound eyes reflecting the glow of the tactical displays. Our agents enter human-controlled areas with full confidence in their abilities. They locate their targets successfully. They approach for termination or data extraction. And then, nothing. They wake up hours later in security custody, with no memory of what subdued them. General Vorthek of the Colonian Shadow Command, his form writhing with barely contained dimensional energy, gestured at one particularly baffling piece of footage. Look at this. Our operative next out phases into what appears to be an empty maintenance corridor on Nexus Station. Watch his dimensional signature. The recording showed energy readings that indicated a being shifting between normal space and the dimensional void that the Colonians used for stealth. There, he stops moving. His phase signature becomes erratic. Then, he rematerializes already unconscious with some kind of metallic restraint around his extremities. Restraints that our engineers cannot identify, added Commander Thexlar grimly. The metal appears to be ordinary iron alloy, but it's arranged in a pattern that somehow disrupts dimensional phasing. Our best scientists cannot explain how primitive human metallurgy could achieve such effects. The conference room fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled intelligence chiefs. For over a millennium, their species had maintained their positions of power through technological and genetic superiority. The idea that humans, with their primitive technology and unmodified biology, could systematically defeat their most elite operatives was more than embarrassing. It was existentially threatening. High Admiral Kexnos of the Combined Fleet spoke first. What do we know about human military capabilities that we haven't considered before? In technologies? Genetic modifications? Psionic abilities? We've analyzed every piece of technology in human possession, reported Chief Analyst Mordeath, a crystalline being whose consciousness existed as living mineral formations. Their weapons systems are chemically propelled projectiles and simple energy discharge devices. Their armor relies on physical barrier methods rather than field generation. Their sensors operate on electromagnetic spectrum analysis with basic quantum resonance detection, nothing that should pose a threat to our advanced systems. Their genetics show no signs of modification or enhancement. Added Biospecialist Texura of the Medical Analysis Division. Standard human baseline across all populations. No unusual neural development. No enhanced physical capabilities. No exotic organ systems. They are, by all measurable standards, completely ordinary. General Vorthek's form pulsed with frustrated energy. Then how are they doing this? How are ordinary humans with primitive technology defeating operatives who can manipulate space, time, and dimensional reality? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning every assumption they had made about human capabilities. For beings who had spent centuries confident in their own superiority, the possibility that they had fundamentally misunderstood their opponents was almost unthinkable. But in the depths of space, aboard the human research vessel Curiosity, Dr. Elena Vasquez was conducting an entirely different kind of analysis. As the lead xenopsychologist for Humanity's Diplomatic Corps, she had been tasked with understanding the behavioral patterns of alien species for negotiation purposes. What she had discovered was far more interesting than anyone had expected. The problem with advanced civilizations, she explained to the secure conference call that connected her with intelligence chiefs on Earth, is that they become trapped by their own capabilities. When you can phase through walls, you start thinking like someone who doesn't need to worry about doors. When you can bend light to become invisible, you stop paying attention to sound, scent, and air displacement. When you can step between dimensions, you forget that someone might be waiting for you when you step back. Director Harrison of Earth's Intelligence Services leaned forward in the holographic display. You're saying their advanced abilities are actually making them predictable? Worse than predictable, Elena replied, pulling up behavioral analysis charts. They're making them vulnerable. Each of these species has developed tactics based on their unique abilities, but they've lost the fundamental skills that any infiltrator needs: environmental awareness, adaptability, and the ability to think like prey instead of always thinking like a predator. Her analysis was based on decades of observation and thousands of hours of recorded interactions between human personnel and alien operatives. The patterns were clear once someone knew what to look for. Advanced beings who had become so specialized in their approaches that they couldn't adapt when faced with countermeasures they hadn't anticipated. The Vorthins phase through matter, but they still need to orient themselves in three-dimensional space when they materialize, Elena continued. If someone understands their movement patterns, it becomes possible to predict where and when they'll emerge from phase state. The Thrakkery bend light around themselves, but they can't eliminate their gravitational signature, their heat displacement, or the subtle air currents they create when moving. The Colonians step between dimensions, but they have to return to normal space to interact with their targets, and they always emerge facing the direction they intend to move. It was a devastating analysis of beings who had considered themselves untouchable. Their advanced abilities had made them powerful, but they had also made them predictable to someone who understood the underlying physics and biology involved. Back in the mountains of Japan, Kenji received Elena's report with the satisfaction of a teacher whose lessons had been thoroughly understood. He had always known that the alien operatives' greatest weakness would be their assumption that human opposition would be technological in nature. They were preparing for energy weapons and detection grids and automated defense systems. They were not prepared for someone who had spent 30 years learning to read the movement of air through silk, to track footsteps across sand by sensing vibrations through wooden floors, to detect the presence of intruders by the smell they carried, and the sounds they couldn't quite eliminate. The ancient arts had prepared him for opponents who were faster, stronger, and better equipped than he was. The fact that some of them could also manipulate exotic physics didn't change the fundamental principles: patience, observation, and the understanding that every living being, no matter how advanced, left traces of their presence for those who knew how to read them. But the galaxy's intelligence services were reaching the limit of their patience with investigation. The Joint Task Force was preparing to move beyond surveillance to direct action, and that meant human lives were about to be put at risk. It was time for the final lesson. The attack came 3 days later, coordinated across 7 different human facilities simultaneously. Instead of sending individual operatives, the alien powers deployed full tactical teams equipped with the most advanced combat technology their civilizations possessed. The assault on Kepler Outpost began at 0300 station time, when a squad of 12 Vorthin warriors phased directly through the station's hull into what their intelligence indicated was the main power distribution center. Their mission was simple: disable the station's defenses, capture key personnel for interrogation, and extract any technology that might explain human defensive capabilities. They materialized inside a maintenance compartment that appeared to be empty except for the usual collection of spare parts, cleaning supplies, and environmental system components. The squad leader, a veteran warrior named Kethrax, immediately began scanning for human life signs while his team moved to secure the area. The attack lasted exactly 47 seconds. When station security forces arrived in response to the automated alarms, they found 12 Vorthin warriors suspended from the ceiling in what appeared to be an elaborate web of maintenance cables and cleaning cords. Each warrior was unconscious, restrained in a manner that prevented them from accessing their phase abilities, and marked with a small paper tag that read, "Return to Sender," in 17 different galactic languages. Marcus Chun was found 6 hours later in his quarters, apparently having slept through the entire incident. Security footage confirmed that he had been in his room during the time of the attack, and his biometric readings showed the steady patterns of normal human sleep cycles. What the footage didn't show was the movement through the service corridors that Marcus had completed in the 12 minutes between the attacker's materialization and the arrival of security forces. The Vorthins had phased into a compartment that Marcus had prepared for exactly this possibility, equipped with restraint systems designed to exploit their species' specific vulnerabilities. The simultaneous attacks on the other human facilities met with similar results. Alien strike teams found themselves facing not the primitive defenses they had expected, but elaborate traps that seemed to have been designed specifically for their unique capabilities and tactical approaches. On Meridian Prime, a Thrakkery infiltration squad discovered too late that Sarah Williams had modified the station's automated cleaning systems to respond to the electromagnetic distortions created by their light-bending technology. Instead of becoming invisible, they found themselves targeted by systems that sprayed them with marking compounds that made them highly visible to every security sensor on the station. At Nexus Station, a mixed force of Colonian and Vorthan operatives walked into what they thought was a routine maintenance area, only to find that David Park had somehow created a localized dimensional interference field using nothing more than modified communication equipment and a precise understanding of quantum entanglement principles. Their exotic abilities became liabilities as they found themselves trapped in normal space with restraint systems that activated automatically when they tried to phase or dimension walk. The aftermath was devastating to galactic intelligence operations. Not only had every single assault team been captured, but their equipment had been confiscated and their tactical methods had been recorded in detail by human security systems. For the first time in their recorded history, the major galactic powers had suffered simultaneous, comprehensive defeats at the hands of a species they had considered primitive and harmless. But the true shock came when the human prisoners were processed and their personal effects were cataloged. Hidden among routine personal items, investigators found something that changed everything. Detailed intelligence profiles of high-ranking military and political figures from every major galactic civilization, along with tactical assessments of their species' major installations and defensive capabilities. The humans hadn't just been defending themselves. They had been gathering intelligence on their would-be attackers for years, learning their weaknesses, studying their capabilities, and preparing for exactly the kind of escalation that had just occurred. In the mountains of Japan, Kenji permitted himself a moment of satisfaction as he read the reports from his students. The galaxy's elite operatives had finally learned the most important lesson of all. The greatest weapon was not advanced technology or genetic enhancement. It was preparation, patience, and the wisdom to know that in any conflict, the victor was not necessarily the one with the most powerful tools, but the one who best understood how to use the tools they had. The alien powers were about to discover that humanity had been preparing for this war longer than any of them had realized. And they were about to learn why. Throughout human history, those who underestimated the quiet ones always regretted it. Hashtag the elite assassins never saw him. Earth's ninja was already there, continued. The Galactic Council's emergency session had transformed from a routine diplomatic gathering into a war council. Representatives from every major power sat in heavily armored environmental suits, surrounded by enough military hardware to level a moon. The paranoia that had infected their leadership was now visible in every aspect of their security protocols. The situation is beyond containment, announced Supreme Admiral Kolthara, her voice carrying the weight of 3 decades commanding the largest fleet in galactic history. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that exceed our theoretical maximums for a species of their developmental level. They have systematically defeated our most elite operatives using methods we cannot detect, understand, or counter. The holographic battle displays around the council chamber showed the scope of the disaster. 17 separate operations across 9 different sectors, each one ending with complete defeat for forces that should have been invincible. The captured operatives were being held in human detention facilities that were somehow more secure than anything the galactic powers could devise, despite being built with primitive technology. Analysis indicates that we have fundamentally misunderstood human capabilities, continued Admiral Kolthara. Intelligence suggests they have been observing and cataloging our tactical methods for decades, possibly since first contact. Every defensive system they deployed appears to have been specifically designed to counter our unique abilities. Ambassador Zethkar of the Vorthan Empire slammed his fist against the table again, but this time the gesture carried desperation rather than rage. This is impossible. We have superiority in technology, genetics, military experience, and raw power. How can a species that achieved interstellar flight 2 centuries ago be outmaneuvering civilizations that have been spacefaring for millennia? The question echoed through the chamber, but no one had an answer that didn't challenge their fundamental understanding of how the galaxy worked. High Arbiter Vexnos, his energy form pulsing with agitated patterns, finally spoke. Perhaps we have been asking the wrong questions. Instead of wondering how they are defeating us, we should be asking why they developed these capabilities in the first place. Species do not create elaborate defensive systems unless they expect to need them. The implications of that observation sent ripples of unease through the assembled representatives. If the humans had been preparing for conflict with galactic powers since first contact, it suggested a level of strategic thinking that none of them had credited humanity with possessing. But on a human diplomatic station Harmony, located in neutral space between the major galactic territories, Ambassador Maria Santos was conducting a very different kind of meeting. The conference room was simple by galactic standards, furnished with basic human technology and decorated with artwork from Earth's various cultures. Sitting across from her were 3 representatives from minor galactic civilizations. The Nexari, whose crystal-based technology had made them valuable but not powerful. The Moltheri, whose biological expertise was sought after but whose military capabilities were minimal. And the Taithkari, whose mathematical and computational abilities were renowned but whose political influence was negligible. The major powers are beginning to understand that their assumptions about humanity were incorrect, Ambassador Santos said, her voice calm despite the magnitude of what she was discussing. This presents opportunities for realignment within galactic political structures. The Nexari representative, a being whose crystalline body chimed softly with each movement, spoke first. Our observations confirm that the traditional balance of power is being disrupted. The major civilizations have lost confidence in their military superiority. They are reconsidering their strategic positions. The mathematical models suggest significant instability in current alliance structures, added the Taithkari delegate, their multiple eyes focusing and refocusing as they processed complex calculations in real time. Probability matrices indicate that the established order will undergo substantial modification within the next standard cycle. Ambassador Santos nodded. Humanity has no interest in replacing the current power structure with one dominated by Earth. Our goal has always been to create a more balanced galaxy where all species can contribute according to their strengths rather than being dominated by those with the most advanced military capabilities. What the major powers didn't know, and what the minor species were beginning to understand, was that humanity's defensive capabilities were only part of a larger strategy. For the past 50 years, human diplomats have been quietly building relationships with dozens of smaller civilizations, offering technological cooperation, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. While the Vorthins, Thrakkari, and Colonians had focused on maintaining their positions through military supremacy and technological advancement, the humans have been creating a network of allies who value cooperation over domination. The Moltheri representative, whose tentacled form shifted colors as emotions passed through their consciousness, expressed what many smaller species had been thinking. The major powers have treated us as resources to be exploited or obstacles to be managed. Humanity offers something different: partnership. The meeting continued for several hours, but its real purpose had been accomplished in the first few minutes. The minor species were confirming their willingness to stand with humanity when the inevitable confrontation came. Not because they feared human military power, but because they believed in the future that humanity was offering. Meanwhile, in the depths of space, the major powers were preparing for a different kind of future. The joint fleet that assembled at the coordinates designated Operation Revelation was the largest military force in recorded galactic history. 700 warships from 5 different species, equipped with weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets, and defensive systems that could withstand the collapse of stars. Their target was Earth itself. The plan was straightforward: demonstrate overwhelming force, demand the surrender of whatever technology or operatives have been responsible for the humiliation of their elite forces, and establish human compliance through the only language they believed any species truly understood: superior firepower. Admiral Kolthara stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching tactical displays that showed the combined fleet's approach toward the Sol system. In 6 hours, they would drop out of hyperspace at the edge of human space and deliver an ultimatum that no rational species could refuse. What she didn't know was that for the past 3 years, every single ship in her fleet had been carrying additional personnel who had volunteered for extended deep space duty assignments. Cultural exchange specialists, anthropology researchers, language experts, maintenance technicians with expertise in alien technology systems. All of them graduates of a certain mountain training facility in Japan. The infiltration had been so gradual, so perfectly disguised as normal diplomatic and cultural exchange programs, that no security system had detected it. The humans aboard the alien vessels appeared in all official records as exactly what they claimed to be: scholars and specialists contributing their expertise to promote better understanding between species. They had spent years becoming trusted members of their host ship's crews. They had learned alien technologies, customs, and tactical procedures. They had identified critical systems, security vulnerabilities, and command structures. And they had been patient. When the combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Kolthara expected to see a minor human defensive force scrambling to respond to the overwhelming power arrayed against them. Instead, her sensors detected something that made no sense whatsoever. Her own ships were broadcasting surrender signals. All of them. Across the entire fleet, command systems were being systematically disabled by personnel who had unrestricted access to critical ship functions. Security forces found themselves locked out of their own armories by technicians who apparently knew their systems better than they did. Communications arrays were being redirected to broadcast messages that their own commanders hadn't authorized. The humans aboard the vessels weren't fighting their way to important systems. They were already there, already trusted, already in position to disable anything that posed a threat to Earth's security. Status report, Admiral Coulthard demanded, but her communications officer could only stare at displays that showed 70% of the fleet's combat capability being methodically eliminated by people who had been serving aboard their ships for years. On the human vessel Serenity, Captain Rebecca Nash watched the largest invasion fleet in galactic history surrender itself without firing a single shot. The irony wasn't lost on her. The major powers had assembled all this firepower to demonstrate their superiority, only to discover that they had been carrying the instruments of their own defeat for years. Signal from Admiral Kolthara's flagship, reported her communications officer. They're requesting immediate conference with Human Command Authority. Captain Nash smiled. Tell them we'll be happy to discuss terms. But they'll be doing it as our guests, not as conquerors. In the mountains of Japan, Kenji Nakamura received the news with the quiet satisfaction of someone whose lifetime of preparation had finally reached its conclusion. The galaxy's major powers have been defeated not through superior weapons or advanced technology, but through patience, planning, and the understanding that the greatest victories were won long before the actual battle began. His students had learned the most important lesson of the ninja arts. True invisibility wasn't about being unseen. It was about being present but overlooked, trusted but underestimated, ordinary but prepared. The major powers had spent centuries building weapons that could destroy worlds. Humanity had spent decades building relationships with people who operated those weapons. But the real victory wasn't the defeat of the invasion fleet. It was what happened next. Because the galaxy was about to learn that humanity's definition of victory was very different from what any other species expected. Instead of demanding surrender, the humans offered partnership. Instead of claiming territory, they proposed cooperation. Instead of establishing dominance, they suggested a new model for galactic civilization based on mutual benefit rather than military supremacy. The major powers had come expecting war. They found themselves being invited to peace negotiations. It was perhaps the most disorienting defeat in galactic history, being conquered by someone who immediately offered to make you an equal partner in your own surrender. And slowly, grudgingly, many of them began to realize that maybe, just maybe, the humans had been offering a better way all along. Hashtag the elite assassins never saw him. Earth's ninja was already there, final. 1 year after the surrender of the combined galactic fleet, the new Cooperative Council held its first full assembly in a space station constructed through the joint efforts of 43 different species. The design was revolutionary in its simplicity. Instead of the imposing architecture that had characterized previous galactic meeting spaces, the station resembled a collection of interconnected gardens, each section adapted to the environmental needs of different species while maintaining open pathways for interaction. Ambassador Maria Santos stood at the central podium, looking out at representatives from civilizations that had spent millennia viewing each other as competitors, threats, or resources to be exploited. The transformation had not been easy, and it was far from complete, but progress was undeniable. The old model of galactic civilization was based on the assumption that superior technology and military force were the ultimate arbiters of political power. She began, her words being simultaneously translated into hundreds of languages and communication methods. Today, we gather as proof that cooperation and mutual respect can achieve what centuries of intimidation and competition could not. In the audience, former Admiral Kolthara sat with the Vorthan delegation, no longer wearing military insignia, but serving as her species' representative for technological cooperation initiatives. The humiliation of the failed invasion had initially driven her to request immediate reassignment to the most remote military post available, but the subsequent negotiations had gradually changed her perspective on what strength actually meant. The humans hadn't demanded reparations. They hadn't insisted on territorial concessions. They hadn't even required formal apologies for the attempted invasion. Instead, they had proposed something that no galactic power had ever offered after a military victory: genuine partnership in building something better than what had existed before. The old intelligence networks focused on identifying and eliminating threats, Admiral Kolthara had admitted during the early negotiations. You have shown us that the greatest threat was our assumption that threats were all we needed to worry about. The transformation hadn't happened overnight. 4 months after the failed invasion, various species had waited for the inevitable human power grab, the demands for tribute, the establishment of Earth as the new dominant civilization. When none of that materialized, suspicion had gradually given way to curiosity, and curiosity had led to tentative cooperation. The Thackeray Hive Collective had been the first to fully embrace the new model. Their species' natural inclination toward cooperation made them ideal partners for the agricultural development programs that human scientists had proposed. Instead of using their light manipulation technology for stealth and warfare, they had discovered that it could revolutionize food production on worlds with difficult lighting conditions. The Colonians had taken longer to adapt, their dimensional manipulation abilities having been so central to their military identity that reimagining their role in galactic society required fundamental philosophical shifts. But human mathematicians working with Colonian theorists had made breakthroughs in transportation technology that promised to connect distant parts of the galaxy in ways that would benefit everyone. Even the Vorthans, whose pride had been most severely wounded by their defeat, had eventually found new purpose in combining their phasing technology with human engineering principles to develop construction techniques that could build structures previously thought impossible. The key to all these transformations had been the humans' insistence that cooperation was more powerful than competition. Every technological breakthrough was shared freely. Every scientific discovery was published openly. Every cultural innovation was offered to any species that could benefit from it. It was a radical departure from galactic norms, and it worked. Trade routes that had been contested for centuries became shared resources managed by joint committees. Scientific research that had been hoarded by individual species became collaborative projects that accelerated discovery beyond anything any single civilization could have achieved alone. Military technologies that had been developed to destroy enemies were being adapted to build infrastructure and explore new frontiers. But perhaps the most significant change was the one that no one talked about directly. The galaxy's elite assassins had found new careers. SYX Tel, the former Vorthan operative who had once been known as the Phantom Blade, now worked as a security consultant for the Cooperative Council, using her invisibility techniques to test and improve safety protocols for diplomatic facilities. Her expertise in moving unseen had proven invaluable for identifying vulnerabilities in protection systems. But her targets now were weaknesses in security rather than people to be eliminated. Zexmoth the Lightbender had discovered that his abilities made him an exceptional instructor for the Council's new joint training programs. Species that had never worked together before needed to learn each other's capabilities and limitations, and his talent for manipulation of visual perception helped create training scenarios that were both challenging and educational. Kethanael the Phase Walker had become part of a search and rescue organization that operated in regions of space too dangerous for conventional rescue equipment. His ability to phase through debris and hazardous materials made him uniquely qualified to reach survivors in situations that would have been hopeless under the old system. They were still elite specialists, but they had learned that their skills could create rather than destroy. The transformation extended to the intelligence networks as well. The vast surveillance and infiltration capabilities that had been used to spy on potential enemies were being redirected toward monitoring natural disasters, tracking resource flows, and coordinating emergency responses across species boundaries. Information was still being gathered and analyzed, but the purpose had shifted from finding ways to exploit weaknesses to finding ways to provide help where it was needed most. In the new Cooperative Council chambers, the session was drawing to a close with reports from various joint committees. Agricultural development was showing remarkable progress on 12 different worlds. Scientific research collaborations had produced breakthroughs in energy generation, medical technology, and materials engineering. Cultural exchange programs were fostering understanding between species that had barely communicated for centuries. But Ambassador Santos knew that the real victory wasn't captured in any of these reports. The real victory was that former enemies were sitting together, working together, and beginning to trust each other enough to share their most advanced knowledge and capabilities. The galaxy was still full of challenges: resource distribution, territorial disputes, technological disparities, and cultural misunderstandings that would take generations to fully resolve. But for the first time in recorded galactic history, those challenges were being approached through cooperation rather than competition. As the session concluded, Santos made her way to one of the station's observation decks, where large windows provided views of the star field beyond. The space around the station was busy with ships from dozens of different species, their distinctive designs no longer symbols of potential threat, but indicators of the diversity that was becoming the Cooperative Council's greatest strength. A soft footstep behind her announced the arrival of someone who moved with the particular grace that Santos had learned to associate with one specific group of people. "Master Nakamura," she said without turning around. "I wasn't expecting to see you this far from Earth." Kenji Nakamura stepped up beside her at the observation window, his appearance unremarkable enough that most of the station's visitors would have mistaken him for a minor diplomatic functionary. "My students have learned their lessons well," he said quietly. It seemed appropriate to observe the results of their education. Santos smiled. The galaxy's most feared assassins are now the galaxy's most effective peacekeepers. I'm not sure if that's irony or justice. It is simply the natural result of understanding what these people truly needed, Kenji replied. They were not evil. They were trapped by systems that gave them no choice but to be weapons. Once offered alternatives, most of them chose to be builders instead. They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, watching ships from former enemy species dock at the station's ports, their crews preparing to work together on projects that would have been unimaginable just 2 years earlier. "The old powers still don't fully understand what happened, do they?" Santos asked eventually. Kenji allowed himself the hint of a smile. "They're beginning to, but it will take time for them to truly comprehend that they were not defeated by superior technology or greater military force. They were simply offered something better than the system they had built for themselves." The transformation of galactic civilization hadn't required any exotic weapons or advanced sciences. It had required patience, preparation, and the understanding that the most powerful force in the universe was the simple recognition that cooperation could achieve what competition never could. The major powers had spent centuries building elaborate methods for destroying their enemies. Humanity had spent decades building ways to turn enemies into allies. In the end, the ninja arts had achieved their ultimate expression: victory without violence, strength through harmony, and the kind of invisibility that came not from hiding in shadows, but from being so trustworthy that no one thought to question your presence among them. The galaxy's elite assassins had never seen him coming because he hadn't come as an enemy. He had come as a teacher, offering lessons in becoming something greater than what they had been. And the greatest lesson of all had been this: the most dangerous person in any conflict was not the one with the most powerful weapons, but the one who could imagine a future where weapons weren't necessary. The age of galactic warfare was ending. The age of galactic cooperation had begun. And somewhere in the mountains of Japan, an ancient tradition that had taught patience, observation, and the understanding of human nature was being preserved for future generations who would inherit a galaxy where the greatest honor came not from being the most feared warrior, but from being the most trusted friend. The ninja had completed their ultimate mission. They had made themselves obsolete by teaching the galaxy that there were better ways to solve problems than elimination. In the darkness between the stars, peace was no longer just a temporary absence of war. It was becoming something that might actually last.